Okay, Susanna, I think we have at least half the people. Let's go ahead and get started. I know that we are limited time
Mhm.
of today, so I'll pass it off to you and we'll get going.
All right, sounds good. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Susanna Mikulin. I'm the proud CEO of the Greater Fayette Community Foundation, and I'm so grateful that you're here today to be part of this informational session about fiscal sponsorships, and I welcome you all. Before we get into the thick of our webinar today, I wanted to take just a few minutes to ground us in who we are as a foundation, what we believe in, and how we work. So, next slide. At GFCF, we're focused on improving the quality of life across rural communities through strategic grant making, nonprofit support, and collaborative partnerships. We live our values of trust-based philanthropy at every level of the foundation. First and foremost, we are community-led. That means residents, grassroots leaders, and those most affected by local issues have a seat and a voice at the table. And we're also inclusive by design. We strive to eliminate barriers to funding for rural and often overlooked organizations, recognizing that equity requires intentionality. And one of the most important parts of our mission is making sure that local change makers, whether it's individuals or organizations, have the infrastructure and relationships that they need to thrive, which is exactly what today's session is about. We have a great lineup for you today. We'll hear from Dr. Bill Moore, our community impact strategist, who will walk us through the basics of fiscal sponsorship and fiscal agency. And from there, we'll transition into a dynamic panel discussion moderated by Crystal Grimes, another great strategist on our team. And you'll hear directly from practitioners and funders who've leveraged fiscal partnerships to support grassroots and rural efforts all across Central Texas. And then we'll wrap up with a short Q&A and some final takeaways from our colleague, Jamie Lee Manning. So I do encourage everyone throughout today's webinar to put any questions that you have into the chat, and we'll make sure to capture all of those and answer them at the end. All right, next slide. This session was truly designed with three key goals in mind. First, to build a strong foundational understanding of fiscal sponsorship and fiscal agency, what they are, how they differ, why they matter, especially in rural areas. These tools can offer a lifeline for initiatives that don't yet necessarily have a 501c3 status. And then second, to learn from real-world partnerships in our region. Our panelists today will share their own experiences, the wins, the challenges, and the lessons that they've picked up along the way. And then third is to shine light on what funders are looking for, whether they recommend fiscal sponsors, and we'll talk about organizational readiness and how you can decide whether fiscal sponsorship is the right step for you and your initiatives. Next slide. And finally, I just want to quickly introduce the incredible team that's brought this session to life. In addition to myself, our Community Impact Program leadership team includes Jamie Lee Manning, our Senior Director of Community Impact, Dr. Bill Moore, Community Impact Strategist with the Strategy Group, Crystal Grimes, Community Impact Strategist with AMA Services and the HEAL Alliance. And of course, we are thrilled to welcome today's panelists. We have Beanie Coleman and Alyssa Reyna from 212 Catalyst, Amy Marita from Central Texas Community Foundation, Dan Kleiner and Eric Jones from Bastrop County Cares, and again, Bill Moore, who brings insight from the Central Texas Health and Wellbeing Network. So again, I thank you all for being here today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill to kick us off.
Thank you, Susanna. It's great. It's great to be with you all today. This is a topic that is actually rather complex. So we're going to try to boil it down to sort of its essentials. But sort of at its core, the difference between fiscal sponsorship and fiscal agency is a matter of control. But in the end, both models of relationship, of partnership, um, are truly that between two entities, between two organizations, um, and and that relationship is really between a 501c3 organization, a charitable organization, and another entity or other organization. So it's a relationship, a legal relationship. In terms of fiscal sponsorship, the entity or the project typically can't receive grant funds. And that could be for a variety of reasons, including its tax status. It may not already be a 501c3. And as you know, most funders typically give grants to 501c3s. I'm going to stay on the left talking about sponsorship. A sponsor accepts the legal responsibility to receive the grant funds and to ensure that the funds are spent in accordance with the grantee's intent and the grantor's intent. So up front, the sponsor is legally responsible for those funds and administering the funds in accordance with the intent of the grantor and the grantee. The sponsor is required to retain the discretion and control of the grant's funds. So I want to be really clear about that. In the end, the sponsor is required to retain the discretion and control of the grant's funds. The sponsor is a neutral party to administer the funds and has control over how the funds are spent to ensure spending is in accordance with the grantee and grantor's intent. Fiscal agency, on the other hand, remember what I said is the distinction between these two is a matter of control. Fiscal agency, also a legal relationship. It can be with another 501c3, or it can be with an organization that or entity that is not a 501c3. The agent does not have the discretion and control that is a required element of fiscal sponsorship. Under agency law, the agent acts on behalf of the other organization, and that other organization has the right and the legal duty to direct and control the activities of the agent. So you can see that there is a lot more control with fiscal agency, and the agent is essentially supervised by the other organization. This arrangement makes the most sense when a small nonprofit that may already be tax exempt wishes to contract with another organization to provide back office or administrative support. So if you're a small 501c3, but you have literally no staff, it makes a lot of sense to have a fiscal agent who will serve your wishes. In the end, fiscal agency is about a pass-through vehicle for a grant when the program implementers don't have the capacity or desire to manage the funds directly. The agency can also provide non-financial services if the need or desire exists and is contracted to do so. So you can see that the distinction between the two is a matter of control and who's in charge. I will say that most fiscal sponsors will take their lead from the grantee and the grantor. They're not operating independently. They are trying to serve the needs of the project or the entity or the foundation. So as sort of stark as it seems that sponsorship has all this control, it really is usually a negotiated relationship that the sponsor's working on behalf of everybody. Next slide, please. So I want to give you a couple examples of sponsorship. There are sort of two broad models, comprehensive fiscal sponsorship and then some pre-approved grant relationship. And that second one is called different kinds of things, but these are sort of the two broad models of fiscal sponsorship. On the left, you have the Community Food Access Initiative, which is an initiative, not a organization. These are actual real world examples. It's sponsored by the Urban Equity Foundation. So the initiative operates under the Urban Equity Foundation's 501c3. So in this case, the initiative is really being managed by the 501c3 in some ways. It's managing payroll, HR, legal, and finances. The CFAI staff are actually employees of UAF. There's no separate board. And this is ideal for projects that are seeking sort of full service support, administrative support. On the other hand, you have the pre-approved grant relationship, and in this case, STEM Equity Labs, which is sponsored by the Alliance for Educational Advancement. Um, in this case, STEM Equity Labs retains the staff and operations. So staff and operations are independent of AEA. AEA, in accordance with what the grant relationship laid out, re-grants funds with oversight from STEM Equity Labs. The relationship is governed by a grant agreement and the reporting requirements that are in the grant agreement. It's ideal for short-term or spin-off initiatives with operational independence. So even within sponsorship, you can see there's variety, there's levels of control and ownership, and it can go everywhere from what is needed in terms of having literally full service management of an initiative to only providing, in the case on the right with the STEM Equity Labs, re-granting of funds. So two, again, different models, but both fiscal sponsors. Next slide, please. And here are examples of actually fiscal agency. Don't know why it says sponsorship on the top. Sorry, that's a typo. On the left is the Arts Festival Fund Administration, which is, again, another kind of model of agency in which you have a project, a festival in this case, having an agent, the Downtown Business Association. In this case, the festival is organized by an informal collective of artists and volunteers who are not incorporated, which means they're not an organization or even an entity, really. But in order to access the grant funds, a city grant for community events, they have to have somebody to act as a fiscal agent solely to receive and disperse the funds. So the key features of this are that the Downtown Business Association receives the grant, holds the funds in a separate account, and pays vendors on behalf of the festival. The festival group retains full control over the program design and implementation, and the fiscal agent charges a small administrative fee, but is not legally responsible for the program outcomes or compliance. So the purpose really here is to just facilitate funding access for an unincorporated group without taking on the programmatic or legal oversight. And then on the right, a similar kind of example where you have a STEM Futures program that has a fiscal agent of an alumni foundation. And in this case, what you've got is a group of professors that are from different multiple organizations or institutions that develop a summer STEM pilot program. A one-time grant from a corporate donor requires that a US-based nonprofit receive the funds. So the university's alumni foundation acts as a fiscal agent to receive and transfer the funds. So the key features of this are the agent, the alumni foundation, receives and disperses the funds based on the written instructions from the STEM program. The researchers manage the program and report directly to the donor. The foundation does not assume any fiduciary responsibility. It's really just a pass-through for the project to get hands into the project. So again, in fiscal agency, you can see there's some variations, but in both cases, the control remains with the organization that is contracting with the fiscal agent. Okay, next slide. So to sum up some sort of big points, I guess, in sponsorship, the sponsor serves really as our nonprofit organization. it's a 501c3 and it assumes legal and fiduciary responsibility for the funds. The donations are tax deductible, and the project or entity operates under the EIN and the tax exempt status of the sponsor. The sponsor provides control, oversight, compliance, and support. In agency, the agent sort of serves in most of the examples as our financial back office. And the agent, who's also a 501c3, can serve as a conduit for funds, but does not assume the legal responsibility for the project, the entity, or the organization. Donations are typically not tax deductible through the agent. The project or entity retains control over operations and compliance, and the agent handles the basic financial transactions like receiving and dispersing funds. It's often used for short-term or community-based projects needing administrative support. So in a nutshell, that is sponsorship and agency. There's a lot of variety, and the one thing I'll say before we move on to the panel is that all of this is negotiated, and it is sort of on a case-by-case basis. No one size fits all. And there are typically a contract or an MOU that is established, memorandum of understanding that's established between the two entities to lay out the terms and conditions of this relationship. So I'll stop there and hand it off to Crystal.
Thank you, Bill.
Mhm.
Amazing information. All right, so we're going to jump into the panel discussion to really tackle and understand some real life, real rural community examples of what fiscal sponsorship or agency can look like, and also to kind of fill in some gaps just to make sure that we are all in great understanding about what this means, implications, and all of the above. And so I wanted to just dive deeper into who you all are and your organizations. And so again, my name is Crystal Grimes. I am the founder and strategist for the Heal Alliance, which is a rural community social change agency all about healing the effects of historical trauma through belonging and connection. And we serve Bastrop Caldwell Hayes, as well as Williamson counties, and growing really to have a model that we can replicate in other rural communities. So pretty similar to a lot of the others that are on the call. And so I'm going to call on Beanie as well as Alyssa for you guys to kind of start us off and really just to introduce us to 212 Catalyst, as well as the service areas that you provide. And do you support fiscal sponsorship or agency or both? If you can just kind of give us a little more information about that.
Yes. Hi, I'm Beanie Score. I'm the CEO of 212 Catalyst, and Elisa Reyna is here on the call as well to support if there are any questions or we need to dig into detail. She actually handles the day-to-day, all the transactions and the details. 212 Catalyst is a consultancy that was designed to be a support, really like a business support to the nonprofit community sector. We do anything from strategic planning to facilitating cross-sector collaboratives. We more and more do direct operational support with finance and also data, performance measures, figuring out those data systems. Do we need this? Do we need that? But certainly we've dug more and more into the finance, and fiscal sponsorship is just increased as a need over time. We also do program quality, continuous improvement support, really an A to Z resource for folks that are just trying to make a positive impact in society. That's our mission. So those are some of the things that we do in fiscal sponsorship, and fiscal agency have been a part of that with rural as well as folks in the Central Texas urban community. It really doesn't matter as much where they are. We provide that support in both forms.
Thank you. And Elisa, do you want to add anything to that? That's
Not
good.
in particular. She
Okay.
went through just about everything. I would just say that, in addition, I've found that I'm doing a lot more like consulting support for the formation of some of the nonprofits that we're supporting as a fiscal agent. Um,
Mm.
they're wanting to talk through what formation looks like and ensuring that they're making the best decisions possible when it comes to developing their nonprofit.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. So next up is Amy Marita with the Central Texas Community Foundation. If you could answer that question as well, what service area does your organization serve, as well as what do you provide in sponsorship or agency?
Sure. Honor to be here. Thanks for having me, everyone. I am Amy Marita. I'm the Executive Director for Central Texas Community Foundation. I've been with the foundation for 11 years, and the foundation has been around for about 21 years, and we were Greater Round Rock until 2023, and we changed our name because we wanted it to be really more reflective of the community that we're serving. We define Central Texas the same way Texas Division of Emergency Management does. So it's a 30 county footprint, but I have funds, I have fiscal sponsorships in the Houston area, greater Texas area, and we're getting ready to bring someone on that's in Miami, Florida, just because um, services like this don't exactly exist everywhere. One of the things that we've been doing since I came on board is we've kind of opened our doors to be a resource because there isn't a single source place for nonprofits or groups or individuals to just get open information. You can maybe if you're funded by an organization, but just a place to ask questions and to get support. And we've got dozens of different fiscal sponsorships that we've done throughout the years. And something that Bill mentioned kind of in passing, but I think that the fiscal sponsorship relationship is one that it truly, especially if there's a grant attached to it, the grant making entity and then the group or nonprofit that's in need of that back end support, it really is sort of a collaborative relationship to see what does it look like, what supports are really necessary or needed. But also, and I think Beanie, you said this, it's a lot more than just providing financial oversight or operational support. A lot of times there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of guidance, there's resources and connections and relationships that are involved with it too. And that's something I always say, our doors are open. If we can be of help or of service, sometimes it's a conversation of, is this what I need, or do I need another path, or is there another relationship that can be productive. And so our goal is really just to be a resource. We want to be a friend. We want to help connect and collaborate and provide answers and solutions. So Crystal, I don't know if I answered.
You did. You did. You did. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. Next up, we have Dan and Eric with Bastrop County Cares, which is an amazing example of just the growth of an organization really standing up to respond to community needs. And so, Dan, Eric, which one of you would like to take that on?
I'll go. Thank you so much, Crystal. My name is Dan Kleiner. I'm the Associate Director here at Bastrop County Cares. We are a rural hub organization, and our structure is kind of modeled after a report that came out by the Aspen Institute in 2019 about rural hubs. We have been both a fiscal agent and a fiscal sponsor in the past. And I really think a lot of our story, Crystal kind of touched on it there, is we benefited immensely from having a really strong fiscal agent for really about the first 4 or 5 years of our organization, which was a very big growth stage.
Dan, you're going in and out. Can you come a little bit closer because we're missing a lot of important stuff.
Yeah. Can you hear me a little bit better now?
Yes.
All right. Sorry about that. So I was saying we have been both a fiscal agent and a fiscal sponsor for other organizations in the past, but I think a big part of our story is that we had a very strong fiscal agent for our organization during a really strong growth period of about 4 or 5 years that's kind of brought us to where we are today. So we have kind of been on both sides of it and would definitely speak very strongly to how our organization grew in ways I don't think we ever could have without a fiscal agent.
Amazing. Thank you. And Eric, you want to add anything to that?
Not at the current
You said, no, you good? Oh,
Yeah, not at the current moment.
okay, gotcha. Thank you. And Bill, anything else to add to that? Because you've been essential in helping a few organizations to seek fiscal sponsorship. So if you want to speak about the Central Texas Network, we can't hear you. Okay. All right. So we'll move on. So we heard what Bill really laid the groundwork for understanding sponsorship versus agency. And this is really a popcorn question. Is it anything else that either of you would like to add to that with really understanding the differences, or even the trends and really how organizations can respond? And those of us who are on the call seeking fiscal sponsorship, what is it that you are looking for in terms of an organization to support in that capacity?
I can answer the last part you said. I think
Yes.
the most important things, if you're looking for someone to fiscally sponsor you, and then an organization that can provide fiscal sponsorships, to me, it's missional alignment. Because in effect, when an organization is fiscally sponsored fully, as in they're not a separate 501(c)(3), and the parent organization is really taking on that legal responsibility, you kind of become a program. In the simplest terms, community foundations are are flexible. We offer lots of flexible vehicles, and there are lots of different ways that an individual or a group can form a relationship with a community foundation. But if I'm taking something to my board, it really is because there's more liability, there's more questions to be answered. I think the important thing is sort of that missional alignment. Are you going to be inside of the scope of what that organization can handle, and are you in alignment with where they're planning on going in the future? What does that look like? And so I think when you're looking for one, sometimes I have had groups come to me in the past, and they have a plan, they have a vision, and sometimes there's an organization down the road that's doing what they're doing, and really the core group of people says, hey, there's this unmet need, and sometimes it is truly just someone that can be well connected in the community, whether they end up getting fiscally sponsored by by a regular 501(c)(3) that had never considered it, or they just become program support, and fundraising for this thing that doesn't take them off mission at all. It's right in line with what they're doing. So, I think the most important thing is to have conversations with people who are willing to open up and provide resources and connections, whether that fiscal sponsorship relationship congeals or not. So, sorry.
I'll jump in there, kind of
Yeah.
piggybacking off of that, the mission alignment and something that, and I've seen this. I've also been technical assistance consultant for Texas Education Agency and a lot of different systems. And one of the biggest things is sort of the dance between, okay, if we're a fiscal sponsor, that means, those things that Bill actually laid out wonderfully. But not so much because as a consultant in the space, I also have helped groups with, for instance, grant proposals, funding proposals. And it's so important, and particularly I see this with rural, because often there's a need for that grant proposal writing assistance, right? Someone who can really come in and write that thing and nail it and knows what funders are looking for. But it's so important that there be a very close relationship to the extent that we're helping each other. Really, most of the implementation, the mission, the writing of proposals and things like really needs to definitely reflect what that ultimate agency that is implementing is wanting to do. And they should definitely know what is in that grant proposal, regardless of who wrote it, right? Sometimes the biggest disconnect I've seen is, groups getting grants, maybe with a grant writer who's helped, but not knowing what's in the grant in order to implement it. in a way, and then wanting to spend money on things that you can't spend money on. It's not in the grant. This isn't
Yeah.
what we said. Or do you know if it's a general operating grant? But usually you're still asked to convey what you plan to do with it, even if it is general operating, and need to stick
Yeah.
with the spirit of what you wrote. And
Yeah.
so just kind of making sure that that remains aligned and that ultimately the implementer is very familiar, with what has been promised, and there's alignment between how to spend the money. And sometimes that's just to have a good conversation, a very thorough conversation before it is submitted, so there aren't just misunderstandings on the back end.
Love that.
I'd like to piggyback on that if I could.
Of course.
Um, it kind of segues into two different ears or legs, if you will. We've spoken already about the entity bearing the legal responsibility on the sponsorship side, right? But there's two components, depending on where you are in the life cycle of your organization. There's two components that we really have to talk about, especially in the rural community where fiscal sponsorship could really benefit someone, right? There's the compliance piece as well as the development piece, right? When you're new in this space and or just getting acclimated in the grant world, there's a lot of nuances that you don't know what you don't know, right? And so when you take on this fiscal sponsorship relationship, you also get to leverage that entity's expertise in the area. Uh, more or less, you can leverage their brand because they're not just a bank account. The misconceptions a lot of times, looking for fiscal sponsors, people are often for a place to park a check or park a donation, but you also get that back office, that CPA that's in the finance. You get help with your 990, all of these other things that
Mhm.
going to impact the life and structure of your organization on the back end, you get help with that. And then on the development side, we talk a lot about the grants, but as if you take on a fiscal sponsor, even if you don't have your 501(c)(3) status yet, any donation made to your organization is tax deductible, right? It's eligible, which opens you up to a whole different range funding opportunities that you wouldn't have if you go a different route or don't go this route at all. And so I just wanted to make sure I put that out there for those who are on the call, wondering if this is for you or not. There are tons of benefits from coming into these relationships. I think a lot of the times the fear is that someone's going to take your baby. It's not that kind of situation. If anything, you get a nanny for your baby, if that makes
I love that. I love it. And you really touched on a few
That's
things.
so good.
Yes, and Alyssa, you kind of nailed it on the head a little bit earlier when you talked about the trends that are really evolving and the ways that organizations are responding to that. BCC, you guys, really good examples of that. Can you just share a little bit more with us about the trends that your organization has needed to respond to in terms of fiscal sponsorship or agency? So if that is support with grant writing and other things, that those on the call may be needing support with, but didn't really understand if that was part of a fiscal sponsorship.
Yeah, definitely. And when approaching a new physical sponsor client, like we don't really go into depth about the additional support that we could provide, but we've been kind of bobbing and weaving this like weird space that the nonprofit world is in right now. And so we found that nonprofit leaders are really looking for additional support. And as a fiscal sponsor, while we don't it wasn't an expectation that we would show up in that way. We are needing to get a little bit deeper about some of the successes and failures that us as nonprofit leaders have experienced as well, and just so that they can have a little bit more confidence in not only the relationship that we're building as fiscal sponsors and clients, but also the hope that one day they're able to go off and kind of let the little bird fly and move forward with, what they're doing, but on their own. But I mean, we even with one in particular client that we're working with right now, we're building out the formation of their nonprofit, and they're like, can we do it one more grant with you just so that we can have that additional consulting support and make sure that we're in a really good space. And of course, we're happy to continue to support, but it's been a little bit of a navigating type of nature with every client because every client's needs are different.
And Bill, thank you for that. And Bill, your mic, is it on yet?
I believe so.
There you go. Good. Okay. And so Bill has really served as a great intermediary between foundations and community partnerships and networks. Is it anything that you would like to add to that piece, especially about the trends and support needed?
Well, I do think that one of the things to understand about the nature of fiscal agency and sponsorship is that often, although not entirely, often it's driven by foundations wishing to manage what they see as a risky, potentially higher risk investment. This is a risk reduction strategy for foundations. And so for from their point of view, it's like, we want to be able to grant to an effort or a set of services or an entity that's got great promise but hasn't yet sort of reached a level of capacity that they feel confident that the funds will be executed right. So it's just important to understand that these are tools that foundations really utilize to reduce the risk that they've got. And I've seen over the course of my career, um, you know, I guess an increasing trend of this kind of grant making that is using fiscal sponsorship and fiscal agency in order to get more dollars out into community and reduce some of the risk that they're perceiving.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And so with there's a few different changes in landscape in terms of funding, funders, and nonprofits, and just all of the things that our organizations are facing right now, what ways are you all responding in order to serve community foundations and organizations, nonprofits, in a deeper manner, especially when it comes to the fear that is happening right now? Are there things that you're doing differently in order to respond to that so that money is still continuing to go out to communities?
So something that I was going to this made me think of. So 212, in addition to just straight fiscal sponsorship, we also a growing part of our business model is direct operational support for the finance function, like where we are actually in essence an accountant but we're more than that because a lot of small startups in particular, they get a bookkeeper and think that they're good. And there's so much more to grant management than that. And especially if you want to grow, especially if you now want a government contract, oh my goodness, that moves you into a space where you're going to have to deal with audits or financial reviews of some sort. You're going to, beyond just entering your receipts, you're going to have to allocate those to the different funds that they belong to. Like this is where we got this income, this grant, and this is the grant that this expense is allocated to for this project. We've also seen lots of need for the back end deep systems view, whether many are in QuickBooks but whatever they're using, all these different apps and things are out there. We will go and look in systems, and things like having a solid chart of accounts is a huge need. It's something that usually is not on people's radar. So important to build a foundation. Also, just being audit ready, having fiscal policies and procedures. Most of the groups that we start off with do not have those things in place and the general policies and procedures that will be required if you are going to get larger foundation grants, government grants, things of that nature. So what we find ourselves doing, what we've actually found is sometimes we'll have short-term clients, what we call short-term, like the fiscal sponsorship on a grant, that turn into ongoing clients because they're just like, can you just, as Elisa said, can you just help us just do this? Just do this for us, keep doing it for us. And as we continue to dig, we realize, and also like HR manuals and all the other systems and infrastructure that needs to be put in place for the running of a healthy business model, is where this all parlays us into, as a consultancy that's kind of helping with a lot of different things. And we found that to be a big gap in the ecosystem, and it's touchy because people don't want to let you in their business as far as finance, and it's a very huge trust-based piece, but it is so important, and it's where we find ourselves a lot of cases.
Crystal, I have a few comments on that just to kind of piggyback off of what Beanie said. For us, it really depends. Are they a separate 501c3 or are they someone who's leveraging our 501c3 in a fiscal sponsorship? Because so it's incumbent on us to make sure that those systems are in place. If it is a group that's come together for a community need and they are not a 501c3 and they need a fiscal sponsor, this is just part of what. So community foundations we're set up by default. We're already we've got all different kinds of funds, scholarship funds, endowments, field of interest, designated funds, and a fiscal sponsorship. Really, for us, it's like its own fund, and so with that, it has fund accounting that goes with it. There's classification so that the group is able to have their financial reports. Where it gets different and where some of the pain points can be is if the entity is already a 501c3 where we're managing some things, maybe we're managing grants, we're managing processes, but we're not managing everything. There can be this confusion of what does that 990 look like? What does that audit look like when there's a dual operational pieces? And I think that the parent organization, the organization that's lending the agency or the sponsorship, really has the responsibility to make sure that there's open communication on that. But Crystal, to answer your question about the trends and things that are coming out, I'd say in the last year and a half, I've seen more organizations reach out to us. They are separate 501c3s, but they're trying to go for these grants because they don't have the audited financial statements. The grants are based on the operational size of the organization, and if their budget is 30,000 and they cap the grant award at 25%, well, my $1.5 million operating budget, or our holistic budget of 6 million per year of what money in and money out, that's something that's a lot easier for them to get. And I think, as to Bill's point, it's kind of like this stop loss. It's this protection for the grant making organization to say, hey, they're backed. And I think for the group that's being fiscally sponsored, then what they get in return, not only do they get something they could not afford on their own with oversight and operations and financial support and all these other pieces, they get credibility as well, of saying, okay, we're backed by this organization, and this organization is in essence vouching for us. And so they kind of form this symbiotic relationship. And obviously there are a fee for these services, because for me, fiscal sponsorships are the one that take the greatest administrative effort, just because there's more activities that are going on. And there is this sort of compliance piece that's on the shoulder of the parent organization. But I've seen, and I don't know if it's a result of the economy and the funding shortfalls and all these other things, but we've had lots of groups reach out and say, we don't want to dissolve our 501c3. We don't want to lose that, but we need someone to step in and represent us in this way, in this grant relationship.
Thank you for that. And I'm looking at our time, so I want to dive into a little positivity and some good stories. So could each of you, or just like popcorn again, share an example of a project or an initiative that you've supported in this way in a rural community, that otherwise it probably would not have been possible. So would love to hear some good stories about what is happening on the ground.
Crystal, I can give an example. At Bastrop County Cares, we partnered with an event called Bila and Beats, which happened in Bastrop. This was about 6 months ago, and it was a very movement focused sort of a day of fun and healing and whatnot. But the reason why they came to us was a great example, just because it was not a 501. It was just an individual in our community who was looking to do some good through that. And so that was kind of the first one that we did. And as you know, I think now we're on the road of sort of doing a little bit more of that. But that was our first kind of big example from last year.
Love that. Thank you, Dan. Amy or
Uh,
Lisa.
I have so many great examples, and this one's brand new and it's small, but we work with the Greater Taylor Foundation. We have sort of a fiscal administrative relationship with us, and the city of Taylor does not have a co-ed. So when disaster strikes, like when the Snowmageddon happened, they were completely isolated, and there were no warming stations. There was no plan to get anyone anywhere, and post that, they were like, we've got to get a plan in action. And so the co-ed needed a fiscal sponsor because they need to be able to take tax deductions. They don't have staff. They're just a group of people that have organized and said, we need to make this happen. So this is like a twofold. So we have a relationship with the Greater Taylor Foundation, and they've come up under the Greater Taylor Foundation's umbrella, under our umbrella, but we're the ones that are actually leveraging the fiscal sponsorship. But it's one of those things you hope they never need it, but the fact that they're organized and they're ready, and next time disaster strikes, this group will be able to operate is pretty cool.
Okay.
I guess our story, and I'll tee it up and pass it to Elisa's Breaking Bread, which is a really neat new startup. I'm the chair of the Jeremiah program on several boards. And Jeremiah program is mothers who have small children who want to get college education, degrees, and there's housing and all of that good stuff. Well, one of the moms who graduated from the program, I interviewed her at a fundraiser, and then of course she made me put my whatever where my mouth was, and followed up and was like, hey, I want to start a nonprofit, because she's in the San Marcos area. She's a little further out than that Central Texas hub. And sure enough, one thing led to another, and I'll let Elisa kind of share a little about the ways that we were able to help them get their start.
Yeah, so it's a wife and a husband who have full-time jobs and are trying to push forth their mission within their nonprofit. And within the last 6 months, we've been able to not only form their nonprofit, give them the tools that they need in order to build out their bylaws, get their board together, set up their financial system so that they can operate on their own. And they're also the ones who are like, we need to hang out a little bit longer because there's more work to do. But it has been really inspirational to see, the constant drive of wanting to make this happen. And so I've been very grateful to work alongside them to ensure that we can make that happen together.
Bill, do you have an example?
Um, yeah, I'll try to be brief. The strategy group, which is the organization I lead, was part of the team that catalyzed the Central Texas Health and Wellbeing Network, and originally in Bastrop County, that's now spread throughout the region. The strategy group is a for-profit group, but we work with the St. David's Foundation to secure the funding to begin catalyzing this network of residents, a resident-led network in the region. And we needed a fiscal sponsor that it could receive funds. And we worked with several. We worked with Bastrop County Cares, with Dan, and they served as our fiscal agent. We worked with the city of Bastrop as a fiscal agent. We've used a number of different organizations to serve as the fiscal sponsor or agent for the work. That network is an entity that is non-organizational. There's no board of directors, there's no paid staff. It's really a movement, and that movement required a nonprofit to be able to secure those funds. That network is now 7 years old. It's got thousands of members, hundreds of trained network weavers. It is now hosted and managed by the HEAL Alliance. But without having some entity, some organization, a 501c3, to serve as the fiscal sponsor for that work, the network never would have happened.
Thank you. I love that. Okay.
Mhm.
And so we're going to give a little space for some questions, but one last piece of advice that you all have to offer to those who may be seeking fiscal support.
Crystal, I'll jump in there. I just would say ahead of time that I'm not paid to give them this plug, but I would really encourage folks on this call to seek a fiscal agent if you're looking to grow. Answering the trend question, the biggest trend I've seen in the last couple of years is foundations giving out unrestricted general operating grants. But to get to the level of trust for a funder to give you that kind of funding, I think you really need to have a track record of a couple years. And I am 100% convinced that the reason our organization was able to get unrestricted general operating grants that allowed us to build out, to hire a human resources director, finance director, those kinds of things, was because we spent several years working with them with a strong fiscal agent. So that's my plug to anybody on this call, is if you see your organization in a place where you'd like to grow pretty substantially over the next 2 or 3 years, working with a fiscal agent to build that trust with funders out there is something I would definitely encourage you to look into.
The lasting words? No? Okay. Well, thank you all. I think we got some good nuggets there. And so I'm going to pass it on over to Jamie to kind of wrap us up and throw us into a Q&A session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal. And thank you so much for the panelists who've offered, I think, some great insights and examples of what it looks like in action. And I think it's also great that there's so many organizations on the call today who are doing the work all across kind of the capital region, Central Texas region. And so hopefully everyone who's participating today can look into the different organizations, that initiatives that we've highlighted today on the panel. Want to just provide a time. I do not see any questions in the chat, which is totally okay, but would like to just open it up if anyone who is on the call would like to take yourself off of video or put yourself off of mute and then open it up. Yeah, just wanted to provide. And if not, I wanted to just highlight a particular resource at the end that Bill Moore has very graciously highlighted as a takeaway. So yeah, any questions around the Bill's portion, the panel portion, any questions? There's nothing too small or insignificant. We want to capture anything that you might have.
Right. Just as a filler, because facilitator too, I'm going to fill up a little bit of space as people might have a question they're typing right now. I wanted to piggyback off of what Dan was saying. It's so important that relationships is very important in terms of when you see people giving these bigger grants, but also, quite honestly, what we found is our finance support allows mission people to stay focused more on the mission than having to sit behind spreadsheets and financial state and things that are not their zone of genius. And even if they happen to be that every now and then talented person that could actually do this, but why would you want to spend hours of your time grappling, sitting behind the finances, and when you could be out doing the mission in a way that only you can do. Because the impact that everybody says they want to see is only achieved by the people on the front line who are working with the people. And not everyone has that talent. Not everyone has that song. Not everyone has that relatability. So whatever people get in the mission for, a fiscal sponsor or any kind of relationship like that is helpful to just offset that responsibility to someone who does this all the time, and to where the funder rests easy and you can rest easy and you can focus on that mission and stay doing what you do and what got you excited and passionate about this in the beginning. And that's the way I say it a lot. I'm like, we do the ugly stuff that nobody likes to do, but it's so mission people, who when you started your organization, it was built around the mission. It was what you were excited about, how you were going to help people. And you clearly had that knack for that, right? You had that it factor for that. So, why? So, waste a lot of time and energy and just suck the life out of yourself doing these things in many cases that are just not really, the joyous part of helping people, because every moment that we can be helping folks, like the need is exponential and it's always out there. And so, also as you're building, even beyond just, for certain amounts of money or certain types of money, think about it as a tool to balance your load.
I love that. And what Eric said it earlier in different ways, get the nanny so that you can focus on, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the great takeaways that I've had from today too, and being able to relay that to all of the organizations that I come into contact with that might be at a growing stage or wanting to build out capacity, is that you don't have to be a non, you have to basically, you can grow your program and be a 501c3 to have these additional supports and resources. And so that is an awesome takeaway. So we are a minute away. We do have a template that I would love to be able to email out. We are going to be following up today with a copy of the slides, a copy of the recording, a self-assessment tool that can help you assess around fiscal sponsorship. And I think it's just a great thing to go through if you're really looking, if you're an individual or a project that does not have that status. We are at time and just want to say thank you so much. If you do have additional questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I can either answer those questions, or Susanna, or we can point you in a direction of maybe one of the organizations that are on the call in the workshop today. So this is just an opportunity for us to really lay the foundation. I know there's probably all sorts of things that we could dive into if we did a 2.0, but hopefully this everyone on the call was able to take something away to help you, whether trying to figure out how to grow your program if you are at a 501c3 already, or if you are a growing initiative that does not have that status, that at least you have some clear indication of next steps to take. So I just want to thank everybody again. Crystal, Bill, Beanie, Alyssa, Dan, Eric, Amy, thank you so much for your time and wisdom and expertise. And as always, Susanna, for helping really guide and welcome us to the session today. So without any other questions, we'll go ahead and end the call, and we will be following up with a recording and all the information that I noted earlier. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.